Close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're standing on a Greek hillside. It's the summer of 480 BCE, and the ground beneath your sandals starts to shake. You think, earthquake? But no, it's footsteps. 1,000,000 footsteps marching in perfect rhythm. You look to the horizon, and it's dark. Not from clouds, but from dust. The dust of the largest army the world has ever seen. They're coming. Persians, Medes, Babylonians, Egyptians, on warriors from 100 nations that tried to resist and failed, and leading them, Xerxes, the king of kings, a man so powerful that when he speaks, entire kingdoms bow. He's coming to make Greece do the same, to snuff out the one little flame in the ancient world that refuses to die. But here's the thing, Greece doesn't bow. In a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae, 300 Spartans dig their heels in and plant their shields. They're not delusional. They know they can't win. But they're going to stand there anyway and say with their shields and spears, "We don't serve kings. We're free men, and we'll die free." This isn't just some ancient war. This is a head-on collision between two completely different ways of life. Empire versus independence. Kings who claim to speak for the gods versus regular people who think they should have a say in their own government. Two philosophies, two futures. Only one survives. And the fate of everything we call Western civilization hangs in the balance. This is Persia versus Greece, the war between kings and city-states. And honestly, the world has never been the same since. All right, before we get to the battles, and trust me, they're incredible, we need to understand something. This wasn't just two countries fighting over land. This was a clash between two totally different ideas about how humans should live. Let's start with Persia. Picture the biggest empire you can imagine. Now double it. The Persian Empire stretched from India to Egypt, from the frozen steppes of Central Asia to the warm Mediterranean coast. Over 2 million square miles, dozens of different peoples, languages, cultures, all under one crown. And that crown, it sat on the head of the great king. Not just a ruler, Persians believed he was basically a god on earth. When he spoke, his word became reality. He had absolute power over millions of people. The Persians weren't just good at conquering, they were brilliant organizers. They built roads connecting their empire. They had a postal system that could get messages across thousands of miles. They were sophisticated, but efficient, and frankly, pretty unstoppable. But here's what you need to understand. Everyone in the Persian Empire was a subject. It didn't matter if you were a powerful governor or a farmer in some remote village. You all answered to the same guy. One voice, one power. The great king's word was law from sunrise to sunset. Now look at Greece. Compared to Persia, tiny, laughably small. And here's the kicker. They couldn't even get along with each other. Where Persia had one king ruling everything, Greece had hundreds of city-states. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, each one fiercely independent, each one absolutely convinced they were better than all the others. They spoke the same language, worshipped the same gods, but politically? They fought each other constantly. In Athens, something really weird was happening, something that had never been tried before. Democracy, not rule by kings or priests or the strongest warrior, but by regular citizens. Free men would gather in the public square and actually debate what to do. They'd argue, they'd vote. Every citizen had a voice. It was chaotic, It was loud, it was messy as hell, but it was also kind of beautiful. Sparta was different. Their whole society was basically a military boot camp. Every Spartan boy started training at age 7. Their entire culture revolved around being warriors. Brutal? Absolutely. Geez, but even Spartan kings couldn't just do whatever they wanted. They had councils, rules, checks on their power. Here's what made the Greeks dangerous. They weren't fighting for some distant king who claimed to be divine. They were fighting for their homes, their families, their freedom to govern themselves. They were citizens, not subjects, and they genuinely believed that dying free was better than living as a slave. So you've got two worlds, one built on order, unity, and the overwhelming power of empire. The other built on chaos, independence, and this crazy idea that free men make better fighters than people who are just following orders. When these two worlds finally collided, the impact would echo for thousands of years. So how did this whole thing start? Well, not with some dramatic declaration of war. It started with a rebellion, and one very angry king who knew how to hold a grudge. Here's the situation. On the coast of what's now Turkey, there were Greek cities, places like Miletus and Ephesus, prosperous, cultured, Greek in every way except one. They were ruled by Persia, and in 499 BCE, they'd finally had enough. These Ionian Greeks revolted. They burned down Sardis, the Persian regional capital, and they declared themselves free. And then they sent messengers across the Aegean Sea, desperately asking their cousins in mainland Greece, "Please, help us. We're fighting for our freedom." Most Greek cities looked at this plea and thought, "Yeah, that's terrible, but not our problem. Too risky, too far away." But Athens, proud, ambitious, sometimes reckless Athens, said, "You know what? We'll help." They sent 20 ships. The city of Eretria sent 5 more. Spoiler alert, it wasn't nearly enough. The Persians crushed the rebellion, absolutely destroyed it. Miletus was burned to the ground. The men were killed. Women and children sold into slavery. The revolt was over, and the Persians had made their point. You don't rebel against the King of Kings. But the Persian king, Darius the Great, didn't just win and move on. Oh no! He was furious that Athens had dared to interfere in his empire, that Athens had helped burn his city. Ancient historians tell us that every single morning Darius had a servant whisper in his ear, "Master, remember the Athenians." And trust me, he remembered. Revenge was coming. It was just a matter of time. Fast forward to 490 BCE. The Persians are coming. 600 ships cross the Aegean. This isn't even the full might of Persia. Think of it as a punitive expedition. A lesson in what happens when you mess with the empire. They hit Eretria first, the other city that helped the Ionians. They lay siege, someone betrays the city from inside, and boom, Eretria is destroyed. Then they turn their eyes south, to Athens. The Persian army lands at Marathon, a plain about 26 miles from Athens. Maybe 25,000 soldiers. The message is crystal clear. Bow down, or we'll do to you what we did to Eretria and Miletus. Athens is in a desperate situation. Their walls won't hold against this force. Sparta, the greatest warriors in Greece, is in the middle of a religious festival and can't march for days. Athens is basically alone. But here's the thing about Athenians. They're stubborn. Instead of surrendering, they march out to meet the Persians. Wait about 10,000 hoplites. And these aren't professional soldiers. They're citizen soldiers, farmers, merchants, craftsmen who own their own armor and fight to protect their city. Leading them is a general named Miltiades, and he's got a huge advantage. He actually lived among the Persians before. He knows how they fight. On a hot September morning, the two armies stare each other down at Marathon. Miltiades has a problem. He's outnumbered. And if he waits around, the Persian cavalry, absolute murder machines, will tear his army apart. So he makes this crazy call. He thins out his center line, bulks up his flanks, and orders something insane. A full charge, across a mile of open ground. Picture this. Thousands of men in bronze armor, sprinting at full speed, shields locked, spears pointed forward, screaming at the top of their lungs. The Persians have never seen anything like it. They're used to armies that skirmish, that fire arrows, that maneuver. Boy, not this bronze battering ram running straight at them. They loose arrows. Some Greeks fall. But the phalanx, this wall of shields and spears, smashes into their lines like a tidal wave. The Greek center starts buckling, just like Miltiades planned. The Persians think they're winning and push forward. But then, the strong Greek flanks wheel inward like a trap snapping shut. The Persians are surrounded. They break. They run for their ships in complete panic. By sunset, 6,400 Persian bodies litter the field. The Athenians, they lost 192 men. Those men were so honored that they were buried right there on the battlefield. The only Athenians ever given that privilege. Legend says a messenger named Pheidippides ran the full 26 miles back to Athens, burst into the assembly, shouted, "Nike! Victory!" and then dropped dead from exhaustion. That's probably not exactly how it happened, but it makes a hell of a story. And that's why modern marathons are 26.2 miles. The victory was real, though. A bunch of citizen soldiers had just beaten the army of the most powerful empire on earth. But everyone knew the truth. This wasn't the end. This was the Persians testing the waters. The real invasion? That was still coming. For 10 years, there's this tense peace. But in Athens, there's one guy who sees what's coming. His name is Themistocles, and he's brilliant. Also kind of a schemer, a political operator, the kind of guy who's always 3 moves ahead. And Themistocles knows the Persians are coming back. Next time with everything they've got. Here's where he's a genius. When they discover silver in the mines at Laurium, most Athenians want to just divide it up. Give every citizen a nice payday. But Themistocles stands up in the assembly and says, "No, we use every ounce of that silver to build ships. 200 warships. We turn Athens into a naval superpower." People think he's crazy. Ships? Why do we need ships? We won on land at Marathon. But Themistocles pushes, and somehow, through pure political skill and force of personality, he convinces them. Athens starts building the largest navy in Greece. Meanwhile, in Persia, Darius has died. His son Xerxes is now king. Oh, and Xerxes? He doesn't just want revenge. He wants conquest. He wants to make Greece a Persian province. He wants the entire known world to bow to him. For 4 years, Xerxes prepares. He assembles warriors from every corner of his empire. He builds a bridge of boats across the Hellespont, literally connecting Asia to Europe. He even digs a canal through a peninsula so his fleet won't have to sail around it. This isn't a punitive expedition. This is total war. The Athenians are terrified, and they send priests to the oracle at Delphi, this priestess who supposedly channels the gods, desperate to know what's going to happen. The prophecy comes back cryptic. Though all else shall be taken, Zeus grants that the wooden wall alone shall remain unconquered. Wooden wall? What does that mean? Some people think it means the old wooden fortifications around Athens. But Themistocles says, no, the wooden walls are our ships. That's where we make our stand. In 480 BCE, Xerxes begins his march. The largest invasion force in ancient history is heading for Greece. And this time, there won't be any easy victories. This time, the Greeks know they're in for the fight of their lives. The ancient historians, guys like Herodotus, claimed Xerxes brought over 1 million soldiers. Modern historians think that's exaggerated, that the real number was closer to 200,000. But even 200,000? That's still the largest army anyone in that part of the world had ever seen. They're coming by land and by sea. And the Greeks do something they've never done before. They actually unite. 31 city-states form an alliance. Sparta will command on land. Athens will command at sea. But they have this impossible problem. How do you stop an army that size? Answer: you don't fight them in the open. You use the terrain. There's this place called Thermopylae. It means hot gates because of the hot springs there. It's a narrow coastal pass, mountains on one side, sea on the other. Maybe 50 feet wide at the narrowest point. If the Persians want to march south into Greece, they have to go through there. King Leonidas of Sparta takes his personal guard, 300 of the finest warriors Sparta has ever produced, plus about 7,000 other Greeks from various cities, and marches north to hold that pass. For 2 days, it's a slaughter. But not the way Xerxes expected. Wave after wave of Persians attack. They crash against the Greek line and just die. In that narrow space, Persian numbers don't matter. They can't surround the Greeks. They can't use their cavalry. Their archers can't get clear shots. And the Greek phalanx, this wall of overlapping shields with spears jutting out, is basically impenetrable. The Persians are dying by the thousands. Xerxes throws his elite troops at them, the immortals, his personal guard, the best warriors in his empire. Doesn't matter. The Greeks hold. Xerxes is sitting on his throne watching this, and he's losing his mind. How are so few men stopping his entire army? Then there's the betrayal. A local Greek named Ephialtes, his name literally becomes synonymous with nightmare in Greek, shows the Persians a hidden mountain path, a way around the pass. When Leonidas gets word that the Persians are flanking him, he makes a decision. He sends most of the Greeks away. Save yourselves. Get back and warn the others. But he and his 300 Spartans, they stay. About 700 Thespians refuse to leave too. They all know exactly what's about to happen. On the 3rd day, the Persians surround them completely. The Greeks fight with spears until their spears break. Then swords. When their swords break, they fight with daggers and their bare hands. They fight until literally every single one of them is dead. Xerxes wins the pass, but he's paid in blood for every inch of it. And he's learned something that probably keeps him up at night. These Greeks don't fight like normal people. They don't break. They don't run. They stand and die. Later, someone erects a stone marker at Thermopylae with this inscription, Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. But here's the thing. While Leonidas was buying time with his life, the real battle was still ahead. The battle that would actually decide the war. Xerxes marches south. He captures Athens, burns it to the ground. But the Athenians aren't there. They evacuated everyone. Women, children, elderly, all on nearby islands. And the men are on the ships. The Persian fleet, over 600 warships, is hunting for the Greek navy. The Greeks have maybe 370 ships, and they're backed into the narrow straits between the island of Salamis and the mainland. Most of the Greek commanders want to retreat, abandon this position, sail south, and defend the Peloponnese. But Themistocles sees something they don't. Those narrow straits, they're not a trap. They're an opportunity. So Themistocles does something incredibly ballsy, and he sends a secret message to Xerxes, pretending to betray Greece. Hey, the Greek fleet is planning to escape tonight. If you block the exits now, you'll trap them all. Xerxes takes the bait. He orders his entire fleet into the straits at night. By dawn, they're packed in there. Exactly what Themistocles wanted. In those confined waters, having more ships becomes a nightmare. The Persian vessels are ramming into each other, fouling each other's oars, blocking each other's movements. It's chaos. The Greek triremes, smaller, more agile ships designed for exactly this kind of fighting, dart through the confusion. They ram Persian ships, board them, sink them. Xerxes is sitting on a golden throne on the shore, watching his navy get absolutely destroyed. Ship after ship goes down. The water's full of debris and bodies. It's a catastrophe. By nightfall, over 200 Persian ships are at the bottom of the strait. The Greeks lost maybe 40. Xerxes came to Europe with the largest invasion force ever assembled. Now his supply lines are cut. His fleet is crippled. Winter's coming, and he can't feed his massive army. He leaves. The King of Kings himself sails back to Asia. He leaves a general named Mardonius with a still huge army to finish the job in the spring. But Xerxes? He goes home in disgrace. The impossible just happened. The Greeks won. One more battle. One final showdown. Spring of 479 BCE. Mardonius still has maybe 100,000 troops in Greece. He tries one last diplomatic move. He offers Athens a deal. Look, betray the other Greeks, join Persia, and we'll make you rich and powerful. You'll share in the empire. Athens tells him where he can shove that offer. So the Greeks assemble the largest united army they've ever fielded. Maybe 40,000 hoplites, plus tens of thousands of light troops. Sparta sends 10,000 warriors. The Athens sends 8,000. Nearly every Greek city contributes soldiers. They meet the Persians near a town called Plataea. For days, it's a standoff. Neither side wants to attack uphill or into bad terrain. Mardonius starts guerrilla tactics, cutting Greek supply lines, poisoning their water sources, trying to break their morale. Finally, the Greeks try to reposition during the night, but the maneuver goes sideways, literally. Units get separated in the darkness. When the sun comes up, the Greek army is scattered and vulnerable. Mardonius sees his chance. He orders a full attack. The Persian cavalry charges. Infantry follows. It looks like the Greeks are about to get annihilated. But the Spartans do what Spartans do. They form their phalanx in the middle of chaos and stand like they're made of iron. The Athenians, even though they're separated, do the same. And then they advance. The Persian infantry breaks first. Then, in the middle of the fighting, Smardonius himself gets killed. Without their commander, the Persian army just collapses. It becomes a rout. Greeks chasing down fleeing Persians. They storm the Persian camp and capture treasures beyond imagination. And here's the crazy part. On the exact same day, legend says the exact same hour, the Greek fleet destroys the remaining Persian ships at Mycale, across the Aegean. The invasion is over. Done. Persia will never threaten mainland Greece again. Against all odds, the city-states beat the empire. So what did it all mean? For Persia? Honestly, these defeats were embarrassing, but not catastrophic. The empire was so huge, it could absorb the losses. They stayed a major power for another 150 years, until some kid named Alexander the Great showed up and conquered them. But for Greece, everything changed. The victory unleashed a golden age. Athens, riding high on confidence and naval power, built the Parthenon. They produced Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. They invented theater as we know it. And philosophy, science, art, all of it exploded. Democracy flourished. This tiny collection of squabbling city-states became the cultural powerhouse of the ancient world. But maybe more important than any of that, these wars proved something that would echo through all of human history. Free people fight harder than subjects. Citizens with something real to lose, their homes, their families, their freedom, will beat larger armies of people just following orders. And this wasn't just Greeks versus Persians. It was a battle between two different answers to this fundamental question. How should people organize themselves? The Persian answer was empire. Unity through conquest. Order through hierarchy. One vision, one ruler, stretching across continents. And you know what? It worked. For centuries, it worked really well. The Greek answer was chaos, democracy, debate. City-states that couldn't even agree on what to have for breakfast, let alone how to run a country. But when it really mattered, when everything was on the line, that freedom, that became their superpower. Our civilization, Western civilization, traces itself back to this moment. Our ideas about democracy, citizenship, individual rights, rule of law, they all flow from here. From these battles where Greeks decided they'd rather die than kneel. We still tell the story of Marathon. We still remember Thermopylae. We still study Salamis. Not just because they're cool military victories, though they absolutely are, but because they proved that freedom, however messy and chaotic, is worth fighting for. The Spartans who died at Thermopylae were told their sacrifice would be remembered. That was 2,500 years ago. And here we are, still telling their story. Because some things are worth dying for. And some lessons, we need to remember them forever. This was Persia versus Greece, the war between kings and city-states. Because freedom is preserved, the story does not end. And honestly, the world has never forgotten.